First, a very warm welcome to our webinar, Food Labeling, Empowering Consumers to Make Informed Choice. First, thank you to Christina Schneider, member of the European Parliament, who is also chair of our working group, Health and Nutrition. She cannot be here, but in the last minute, we got also her speech. I think, yeah, she would be very much to be here, but sometimes it's happening that also private matters are very important in times of COVID. So I asked my colleague Stephanie Offe to hold the opening speech, and then I will welcome our speakers immediately. Please, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you very much. So I will cite her. So every time I'm talking about it's obviously her. All right. So dear ladies and gentlemen, dear guests and dear colleagues, it is a great pleasure to welcome you to our working group webinar on food labeling, empowering consumers to make informed choices. As the EPP Shadow Rapporteur on the Farm to Fork strategy, this topic has been keeping me busy for months. The Farm to Fork strategy makes the beginning of a process aiming to fundamentally change the way EU agriculture operates and food is produced for and provided to EU consumers. On the farm side, there are many concrete measures presented. This is not the case for the fork side. There are still many open questions, and today we want to talk about the core of the fork side, food labeling. Within the Farm to Fork strategy, the Commission announced several measures for labeling. These measures are controversial among some EU member states and include EU harmonized mandatory front pack nutrition labeling, and as well as the extension of origin indication for certain products. For me, it is very important that we take now the right steps forward to good food labeling. But what is good food labeling? Which labels do we need? To me, the overall goal is to put consumers in the position to make informed decisions when she or he is buying food. Basis for this decision is the provision of the relevant information. The consumer wants to know where the food comes from. He or she needs to know which ingredients and nutrients are used. The consumer is also interested in the method of production, for example, for the meat or the CO2 footprint. To guarantee a comparable situation also cross borders, we need a compulsory harmonized approach. We need the same labeling in every member state, but what sounds good in theory is not easy to achieve in practice. If we use two simple labels, the information is not sufficient and the consumer is not in the situation to compare different products. If we ask for the provision of too many information, it can be too confusing. We definitely need to avoid a jungle of labels as well. The presentation of the relevant and comprehensive information is definitely more important for processed food than for pure food products. But how could a good food labeling look like? In my point of view, we need a mandatory labeling. We need to provide information on the nutrition profile, the origin, the compliance with animal welfare provision, and sustainability to make the best informed choices. I want to achieve the introduction of a QR code, which could even provide additional voluntary information for food products. Let's create an app, EU Healthy for Food. Finally, we must not forget, even with the best labeling, the consumer needs to understand which choices is the best for a healthy nutrition. This is why education and information campaigns are as important as the good labeling to empower the consumers for the consumption of healthy and sustainable food. I am looking forward to a fruitful exchange. Thank you.
Thank you, Steffi. I think Ms. Schneider gave us already a very good overview about the topics we have to discuss. I think there are many issues she mentioned. I think one that we will discuss is that this mandatory labeling coming in the European Union. I think also the practical idea of to have an app like EU for Healthy Food is I think very good. And at least I think in the center of the attention is of course to empower the consumers. And now we have coming to the introduction, and I have the honor and the luck to welcome Adrián Vázquez Lazara, member of the European Parliament and member of the Agri Committee. And you are representing today only live the Parliament. We are keen to listen what your ideas is about how we can solve it, this food labeling, that we, the consumers, can make a common choice, a good choice, and that we have fair competition in the market. I think it's not such an easy approach. Please, the floor is yours.
Good morning, and thank you very much for the introduction. Thank you very much for having me here today. I have to say that I'm connecting from Seville, from Andalusia. As you can see behind me, we have a beautiful day. And as you all know, Andalusia is one of the main agricultural regions of Spain and of Europe, where its food is probably a symbol of the Mediterranean diet that characterizes so good the Southern European countries. When we discuss about the need for this food labeling, the need for empowering consumers to make informed choices, the main goal within our union is basically to harmonize the single level at European level. The Commission willingness to present harmonizing text by next year is a step in the right direction. As an example, exports, imports on the internal market should not be disturbed by the multiplicity of different labeling systems that each member state has. We have many examples that can define this. A Spanish milk producer, for instance, exporting with Nutri-Score labeling to Italy, where they have a completely different labeling system, could actually not only put some troubles to the exporters, but also it puts a lot of trouble to the consumers of the importing country. In Spain, we have the same. If an Italian citizen comes to Spain for holidays and goes to the supermarket and wants to buy ham, and while in his country ham is not labeled on one or a different, level of healthy, and Spain sees that the ham is characterized as a red product, something that is not that healthy, that also can contribute to mislead the consumer. So it's definitely, as it was said in the introduction, it's not an easy task. It's one of the great challenges, I would say, that we have the legislators. And one of these great challenges also is not only to find a good way to harmonize in this single leveling at the European level, but also how are we going to bring in together all the stakeholders of the supply chain, from the farmers, from the producers, to the supermarkets, to the consumers. So it's not going to be an easy task. And 2022, I think, is a quite ambitious date to try to bring in a harmonizing text. For me, the main issue also when it comes to empower the consumer is that the legislator shouldn't fall into the idea that simplification implies better or more information for the consumer. That many times is not the case. And I'm going to take, if you allow me, Nutri-Score as an example to try to drive through the viewers on this point. Providing more information to the consumers, of course, is essential, but it's also important to avoid giving a false impression that buying A or B products means buying healthy. This is not currently the case in many products, and legislator, we may fall on trying to not empower customers, but educating them. And I think that, customers, we should treat them also as adults. I know perfectly fine if my grandma, my mom, or myself, or my dad, or my cousins, they know when they go to the supermarkets what could be healthy or not, depending on how much quantity they take. Most of the people does. So I think that our main goal here is to empower them to make good choices or informed choices, but not to educate them what choices they should actually choose. In this sense, Nutri-Score labeling as it is today in its current conception, for me, is too simplistic. Why? Because it has algorithms that not take into account a number that I consider key factors: positive properties of vegetable fats, for instance, or the level of processing of the food that consumers buy. And seeing a high quality product, I'm gonna, of course, use an Spanish example like Iberian ham, with a negative labeling in the Nutri-Score scale, can definitely negatively influence even to the educated consumer. It even happens to me in Brussels last week. I went to a very well-known supermarket chain, and I wanted to buy fresh juice. And you have the options of these fresh juices that they have been frozen for a few days, but they're fresh, they don't have any additives. And in Nutri-Score, it was giving a C or a D, I don't remember that. And even myself, that I know how this works, I had the doubt if this was healthy or not. Well, it was just fresh juice. So these are the things that can create, that can mislead the consumers. And I don't think that empowers them, actually. That actually mislead them in many senses. Also, something that you said, Dr. Horst, on the problem with the market. I also see many supermarkets that now they kind of push the consumer to buy the healthy products according to a certain labeling, trying to actually push them on that direction. And sometimes the consumer doesn't know if the same labeling changed completely from one whole, where you may have ultra-processed products, to a different hole that you have mono-ingredients products. So all these things worries me a lot, because I don't think that we are setting good standards to understand how we can actually empower consumers in the future with this attempt to try to harmonize the labeling. Also, a model is being implemented, and we have seen this in several countries, without the necessary consensus along the food chain. And I'm going to use my country as an example. The Spanish government a few months ago announced that it will include the Nutri-Score labeling system before 2021, like other countries have already done, like France, like Germany, like Belgium. And I don't think that this is good. If we are working at the European level to try to harmonize the labeling, I don't think that countries should rush now to get one system before the European directive comes out. I think it will be good to try to, of course, talk with all the supply chain stakeholders first at every state member. And then once the European Union brings a proposal, then it will be the moment that those countries can actually decide what kind of labeling they can take at the European level, not a national level. Also, I have to say that in this case, when it comes to Spain, and that's why I'm in Andalusia actually these days, the labeling system enjoys a strong support from some large agri-food companies and major consumer associations, but all the primary sector is very dissatisfied. I haven't found yet one primary sector stakeholder that is satisfied with this kind of labeling. And that's why I came here for a couple of days to talk with many of these stakeholders to understand what are the complaints, many of them that I do understand. But don't get me wrong with this. I'm not saying that Nutri-Score is not the way forward. Actually, I think Nutri-Score may be one of the less bad of the systems we have now to actually use, but it's probably not perfect. And as a legislator, I think that the European Parliament shall address a number of issues before discussing this kind of labeling systems. The first one for me is the specificities of products under the EU quality scheme, like PGI, PDOs, that should be taken into account. It is worth to wonder what will happen if, for instance, Nutri-Score or other labeling system apply to such products. Essentially, in terms of image, we have to understand that PGAs, PDOs play an essential role in European Union exports and in the promotion policy, and also in some countries like Spain, Italy, France, that we have probably the highest number of these kind of products. They are very important when it comes to the regional and national cultural roots of the way we eat and the way our culture behaves when it comes to food. Also, I think that in these systems, in this labeling system, a high level of processing is often, not always, an indicator of low product quality and a high presence of additives. And also it's well known that industry have improved a lot in these processes. This point should be included in the discussion on the evolution on the algorithms that define which products are healthy or not within this labeling. Also, for instance, there are a lot of mono-ingredient products that currently score poorly in this system of labeling, and this has been the case for olive oil and continues to be the case for honey or even in ham, among others. Also, and I know there is a lot of scientific data in this sense, but I'm also well aware that it's not only in scientific data, but a lot of pressure from consumer associations. Sometimes the labeling, and I know that is a very controversial topic, they use the same quantity for measuring the healthiness of the products. But we all know that it's not the same to consume 100 milliliters of olive oil than 100 of milliliters of soda, for instance, and that you don't consume olive oil like that, you know. So that also can, it can actually label some of these products in a very negative way when the consumers already know that they're not going to get a bottle of olive oil and just drink it like they drink a soda. And the last point also, I'm also worried about how these labeling systems, they label some products that they are not only mono ingredients, but they have maybe 3 or 4 ingredients that they have a positive nutritional value, like cheese, for instance. Cheese basically is made of milk, rennet, and salt, or canned fish and seafood in olive oil, because these systems usually they penalize the covering liquid, while it's very necessary to keep those products in good situation. However, to conclude, for me, it's definitely that it is time for the European Union to push forward legislation to harmonize from pack labeling at the European level. but we should take into account, for me, three main issues. The first one is that the main goal, as this panel is entitled, is to empowering consumers to make informed choices, not to necessarily educate them. I think we should treat citizens as adults in many sense. Also, we cannot leave out concerns from main stakeholders of the supply chain when we develop this labeling system. And I'm talking about from farmers to small producers, but of course to big agri-industries or consumers associations that they're already there pushing a lot some label systems. But we also have to listen the small farmers, the small cooperative of small producers and so on. And also necessary, we shouldn't rush if we haven't yet come up with a balanced labeling system. That's why I'm saying that we have to wait for the Commission. But if we still don't have a balanced system, and I have talked with many developers of different systems at European level, and of course none of them is perfect, but if we still don't have a balanced one, maybe we shouldn't rush to actually push to harmonize one if we don't have a good one. And I don't want to fall into the least bad labeling system argument, because I don't want that. I think we can do much better than that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think, Mr. Lazara, you gave us a very good overview about the discussion, the critical points we have to see if we introducing a system, a new labeling and so on, or a better informed labeling, that we are not making mistakes and misleading the consumers. How we guiding the consumers, what we can expect from the consumers, if we should expect that he can make more his own choices, or he needed more simple explained. I have to say, if I'm as a consumer reading these things, fat, sugar, I understand, but some details or substance, I don't understand what it means exactly. Perhaps there we need more education. And of course, we have also a discussion, is every natural product also healthy? In general, yes, it's I think, but there are also natural products where also the amount I eat makes a difference. So I think it's not such an easy discussion, and we should not simplify it. And I think the only solution in long term is education. But how to empower this and how we understand this, what we are buying daily in the store, is really complicated. And I think to empower the consumers, we have to do some steps in Europe that at least we understand in Spain what it means and what it means in Germany, or not. Then we're coming sooner than expected to the keynote, to the main speech about the technical aspects, how to introduce, or legal aspects, how to introduce such information, food labeling for the consumers. I have the pleasure to welcome Ariane van der Stappen, Deputy Head of Unit for Food Information and Composition, DG Sante, European Commission. Please, the floor is yours.
So it's really a pleasure for me to be here today, and I see that the level of knowledge is already very, very high about what is ongoing and all the challenges ahead of us to aim this goal to empower the consumers to make informed choices. So, as you know, one important priority of the Farm to Fork strategy is to create a food environment that makes healthy and sustainable foods the easy and also the affordable choice for EU citizens. And it's obvious, clear food information plays an important role, as it can help citizens to make these healthier and more sustainable choices. It is a fact that current food consumption patterns are unsustainable from a health and an environmental point of view. Average intakes of energy, red meat, sugars, salt, and fats in the EU continue, and this is factual, to exceed recommendations, while the consumption of whole grain cereals, fruit, vegetables, nuts, and so on remains insufficient. Of course, unhealthy diets are not only an individual issue. Consumers are affected by a range of factors when making food decisions. Factors such as the food offer, food prices, food information, here we are, but food marketing, etc. All that impact the dietary choices of the consumers. As Commission, as you know very well already, we are taking now several actions to improve the food environment so that, as I just mentioned before, the healthy choice should become the easy choice. So let me highlight some of these actions that have been already mentioned by the previous speakers in a very intelligible way, but I will repeat certain things and maybe going a bit further into certain elements. So one of the important initiatives of the Farm to Fork strategy, and we didn't speak about that so far, is the setting of nutrient profiles. Some may recall this already failed attempt in 2009. So here we are. We will try again to develop nutrient profiles, because nutrition and health claims can mask the overall nutritional status of food products, which obviously could mislead consumers. So the setting of nutrient profiles will prevent a positive message on foods with an unhealthy profile. It will then provide clarity and consistency to consumers and facilitate these healthy food choices. Another initiative, and we spoke already about it, arising from the Farm to Fork strategy, is the harmonized mandatory front of pack nutritional labeling that the Commission will propose at EU level. As you know, several voluntary schemes already exist on the European market. Some of them were already mentioned, such as Nutri-Score, we have the Keyhole, we have the UK traffic light, and so on. These schemes have been developed by public institutions, but also by health NGOs or even private sector organizations. A fact again, most consumers declare that they find front of pack labels helpful. And studies show also that overweight, obese people are more likely to report a need for a front of pack label to facilitate their food choices. And scientific studies further confirm the potential of front of pack nutritional schemes to help consumers to make these health-conscious food choices. Of course, we are well aware of the different and divergent views among stakeholders and between member states. This is clear. The issues of the specificities of some agricultural traditional foods and the differences in national dietary habits have already often been raised. And these elements, let me reassure you, will be taken into account during the process. I will say how the process will go on in a minute. Nevertheless, and it was said also before, most recognize that there is a need for harmonization. And there I come with another topic. Let me say now a word on the Commission's announcement to consider to propose the extension of mandatory origin to certain products for which consumers show a strong interest. The initiative announced in the Farm to Fork strategy on origin labeling aims to allow consumers simply to better identify the origin of food and to facilitate consumers' informed and sustainable food choices. The adoption of national measure, as it is the case now, is not the appropriate way to respond to consumers' demand. The extension of mandatory origin will ensure that consumers across the EU receive the same information on origin. This will preserve the integrity of the single market and will establish a level playing field across the EU. The extension of mandatory origin labeling to additional categories of food products can reduce the cost operators are currently facing in complying with a variety of national mandatory origin labeling schemes that will be all, I would say, assessed carefully in the framework of an impact assessment. And here I am. The future proposals of the Commission will all be based on the results of a thorough impact assessment, which already started with the publication in last December of the Inception Impact Assessment. There will be extensive consultation of stakeholders and member states. Proposal will be science-based, based on facts. In this respect, the Commission mandated EFSA to provide up-to-date scientific advice. So we have already reports and so on, but we will have up-to-date scientific advice during the course of this year. And also the GRC to update its scientific literature review on the impact of front-of-pack nutrition labeling on consumer understanding, consumer choices, and health, as well as to look into scientific studies on origin labeling. The different policy options for these different initiatives were published, as I said, in the framework of the Inception Impact Assessment last December during 1 month for public feedback. And we received more than 450 contributions. This shows clearly the interest of stakeholders and citizens in the topic. So during the course of 2021, so quite soon, all interested parties will be further consulted, and in particular, the food business operators, consumers, and member states. For SMEs, target consultations are foreseen in our consultation strategy. The impact assessment will assess for different options and for the SMEs in particular, the costs and burdens compared to the current situation, the impact on their competitiveness, as well as the degree of technical feasibility. All these elements should allow us to come forward with a balanced proposal, which was already highlighted by the previous speaker, based on a thorough understanding of the different aspects and all the potential impacts of these initiatives. Last, I would like to add a few words on another forthcoming proposal, because the Farm to Fork strategy announces as well that to empower consumers to make informed, healthy, and sustainable food choices, the Commission will prepare a proposal for a sustainable food labeling framework that covers the nutritional, but not only, also the climate, environmental, and social aspects of food products. The proposal for the legislative framework for sustainable food system and its principles, foreseen for 2023, it's a bit later, will provide an important input to this exercise through its general principles and common definitions. As Commission, we are convinced that by working together in a constructive way, it will be possible to find the best solution for European citizens to be able to make informed choice and also realistically achievable for our food business operators. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this presentation. I think it's gives us also this perspective, the scientific way to empower consumers is to harmonize it. I think we will have question and answers later after the presentation of all speakers, but I think to harmonize it is not such easy because also the recommendations of food, what you should eat, are different in Europe. So the scientific approach is not always the same ideas, what is healthy or not, and sometimes it's changing also in the years. But I think this will be here now also from our speakers now. And I would like now also to use the chance again to have the video statement by Salvatore De Meo. I think the technical problem is solved now. Please.
Yes, it should be solved now.
Buongiorno a tutti. Innanzitutto desidero ringraziare la collega Christine Schneider che ha aperto il dibattito di oggi su un tema così importante come l'etichettatura degli alimenti. Ringrazio inoltre il moderatore, il dottor Heitz, e gli amici di SMEs Connect per aver organizzato questo webinar che sicuramente aiuterà ad analizzare in maniera puntuale le dinamiche inerenti all'etichettatura fronte-pacco. Mi scuso per la mia assenza di oggi, dovuta ad un sopraggiunto ed improrogabile impegno di partito, ma considerata la rilevanza dell'argomento ho ritenuto doveroso intervenire per poter dare a tutti i presenti qualche spunto di riflessione. Sono membro delle commissioni Agricoltura e Ambiente, ma voglio precisare che grazie al mio ulteriore ruolo nella commissione IMCO ho potuto acquisire anche la giusta sensibilità in merito alla protezione e quindi alla salute dei consumatori. Alcuni paesi, seguendo l'esempio della Francia, hanno deciso di adottare un sistema volontario di etichettatura fronte-pacco denominato Nutri-Score, su cui si è aperto un dibattito molto animato. Altri paesi invece, come per esempio l'Italia, hanno deciso di privilegiare un metodo meno cromatico, ma più scientifico, per la comunicazione dei contenuti nutrizionali al consumatore finale, il cosiddetto Nutriform. I sistemi di etichettatura nutrizionale fronte-pacco sono sistemi supplementari alla dichiarazione nutrizionale, poiché ne riprendono in maniera semplificata alcuni elementi che sono già obbligatoriamente richiesti in etichetta nel retropacco. Ogni sistema ha sicuramente più punti di forza e svantaggi. Tuttavia credo che l'eccessiva semplificazione vada evitata se vogliamo dare al consumatore informazioni immediate su un determinato alimento, evitando una confusione che rischia anche di danneggiare l'intero settore agroalimentare. Il Nutri-Score si basa sullo stesso criterio dei profili nutrizionali, una classificazione sulla quale la stessa autorità della sicurezza alimentare europea aveva già evidenziato le limitazioni scientifiche per 3 motivi principali. Innanzitutto poiché ogni alimento cambia la sua composizione e i suoi effetti nutrizionali quando è combinato con altri cibi. In secondo luogo, perché la struttura di un alimento viene modificata durante la fase di preparazione e cottura, che tra l'altro spesso include l'aggiunta di altri ingredienti. Infine, poiché i profili nutrizionali partono da valori di riferimento sull'assunzione quotidiana di diversi alimenti che vengono stabiliti per l'intera dieta. Bisogna tenere a mente che non sono i singoli alimenti a causare problemi di salute, come ad esempio l'obesità, il diabete o le malattie cardiache, che sono un problema multifattoriale, in cui lo stile di vita delle persone è determinante. Quindi, più che eliminare totalmente degli alimenti o delle categorie alimentari dalla propria alimentazione, bisognerebbe tenere un regime alimentare equilibrato nel suo complesso, in cui ogni alimento può avere un posto nelle appropriate quantità. È scontato dire che per prevenire alcune malattie è necessario svolgere sempre un adeguato livello di attività fisica. Voglio ricordare che il Parlamento europeo già nel 2016 si è espresso con l'utilizzo da parte delle aziende di pubblicità salutistiche sulla base dei profili nutrizionali. Io credo che il sistema di etichettatura Nutri-Score semplifichi eccessivamente i prodotti, classificandoli in buoni e cattivi, in base al colore verde, giallo o rosso, dove il colore rosso indica un allarme, un segnale di pericolo su un determinato prodotto, ignorando invece il suo apporto nutritivo alla nostra salute. Quindi, seppure le sue intenzioni siano buone, il rischio di un sistema come il Nutri-Score è proprio quello di demonizzare alcuni alimenti, spaventando il consumatore che si trova di fronte ad una scelta ridotta a 3 semplici colori. Chi di noi non si sentirebbe almeno un po' in colpa a comprare un alimento segnalato come rosso quando accanto ne abbiamo uno più rassicurante contrassegnato in verde? In realtà bisogna prendere in considerazione il reale consumo giornaliero di alimenti e bevande e non la generica unità di misura di 100 grammi a cui fa riferimento il sistema di etichettatura Nutri-Score. A mio avviso l'Unione Europea deve impegnarsi per avere un sistema armonizzato comune che permetta al consumatore di fare una scelta consapevole, responsabile e sostenibile. Il sistema a batterie, per esempio, utilizza il simbolo della batteria, dove il livello di carica rappresenta l'apporto nutrizionale di un alimento rispetto al complessivo fabbisogno alimentare giornaliero. Per concludere, è fondamentale fornire una chiara e corretta informazione sui cibi che noi e le nostre famiglie consumiamo, ma per essere tale deve essere supportata da evidenze scientifiche, altrimenti rischia di essere fuorviante. Inoltre, se vogliamo sconfiggere l'obesità e altre malattie derivanti dalla cattiva alimentazione che stanno colpendo i cittadini europei, bisogna focalizzare l'attenzione anche sull'educazione al mangiar sano, integrandola con sport e attività fisica.
I think this was also an interesting contribution. I think this is a little bit like in the same line of Mr. Lazzara, what we hear now. I think that he is also mentioned, Salvatore De Meo, that's of course the whole package we have to see if we want to have a healthy lifestyle, that we have also to integrate sports and also that the approach is perhaps a danger if we make it too simple. But I have also the question, in the same time, it must be understandable. So it's practical means often also to be simple, but simple is perhaps often a problem to make things not in the right context. So we have here now really a problematic how a sign is really to handle, and the consumer can use it, understand it, and at the same time not too misleading with this some labeling in a good sense. So we're coming now to our first intervention from Mr. Johann Sanders, president of Fedema. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Okay, great. So Horst and others, thank you very much for having me here today. And first of all, I must say I'm very impressed by the introductions so far. Today I'm representing Fedema, and Fedema is the European Association for Bakery Ingredients, and the association has as a vision to support and grow the bread and pastry markets, but even more to create a favorable environment, ensuring a sustainable, and I think that's interesting in this context, and an innovative bakery industry, and I will come back to that as well. So what's Fedema's position on front of pack labeling? We feel that a harmonized and a front of pack nutritional label makes sense, but I think it's the first point, it should be harmonized. What we see today is that we start to get, let's say, unharmonized solutions, which is not beneficial for let's say, a European trade. And Mr. Lazar was explaining that as well. But also what we've heard today, but I think is very important, it should be a front of pack labeling which is very objective, science-based and transparent. Because at the end, if it's not transparent or not science-based, you don't empower the consumer, you confuse the consumer. So it's extremely important that the methodology being used is really transparent and objective. So we as Fedema members, we welcome a harmonized front of pack nutrition labeling, because we feel that might help consumers to make more informed decisions. However, we see that, and I think it was mentioned before as well, some of these systems we see today oversimplify the current situation. So what you see that moderate intake of products, which might be kind of not included. So purpose and consumption frequency should be really taken into account. And portion size and calorie intake also play an important role next to the nutrition, to the individual ingredients. So overall, we see that the simplification on grams or kilograms or is maybe too simple, and we should come to a kind of more complicated or more, let's say, elaborate system without overcomplicating it in the communication to consumers. So what are challenges? And I think some of these challenges have been mentioned already. We see that in our industry, some products have specific technical functions and traditional elements. So replacing ingredients, because you have to realize at the moment you start to do front of pack labeling, our industry and industries will start to aim for, let's say, the more green codes. So if we have then limitations in terms of going to a more green labeling, Nutri-Score thinking, we should realize that sometimes replacing ingredients is not easy, and it might hurt traditional cultural aspect. And we talked about olive oil, honey before in this context. But also we see that there is limitations in formulation for products which are protected or have a protected geographic indication. Also, this was discussed. So we should not throw away with a simplified system the heritage of food we have in Europe. But I think there's also a call for the European Union, because at the end, the ambition to have a front of pack labeling is to get to a more healthy diet. So then we also have to allow the industry to create a more healthy diet. So for example, if you think about our industry, alternative sweeteners are not allowed in bakery industry. So these, for example, are allowed in North America, which allows to go for more significant sugar reductions than we can in Europe. So at the moment you provide a Nutri-Score, you also have to allow the industry to make even more healthier products than they do today. But there's also something else which is hindering us. If you want to make a claim or a statement that you have a calorie reduced or a more healthy product, there are hurdles which are quite significant. And these hurdles will force people, let's say, almost not to make small improvements, which would really help the consumer. So we also need to think how smaller improvements in recipes and products can drive the consumers to an even more healthy diet. So these are a few things the European Union could help us with. But at the end, to conclude, I think at the end education is key. A lot of information is already available. Back of pack, you can find information on fat, sugar, calories. You can find information on key ingredients. So if we simplify all of that with a simple Nutri-Score or something else, it might be too simple. But therefore, it's key that we educate our consumers so that they really understand what information we already provide, but also how a healthy diet could be made by making a balanced decisions on what they eat day by day. So thank you for that, for attending to listen to my short presentation.
Thank you, Johann. I think you gave us also now newer perspectives to think about this, what it means to traditional foods, what it means also to change recepts only to fit to a good ranking. And perhaps this is also misleading if I'm buying a product, a traditional, and I want to have traditional ingredients, and then the product is not made out of this. It's also kind of misleading because I'm expecting it's made out with honey, and then it's subsidized, and I don't read the package perhaps. So it can be also misleading. I understand this, and again, education is coming up. I think this order is now, we can choose it. Federica Deutsche, Policy Officer and Project Coordinator of SAFE. Please, the floor is yours. And I think thank you that a consumer organization has also here this place. I think it's working only with consumers and producers, because I think this is environment where we have to work together. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you for all the speakers indeed for the very interesting insights on the discussion. So I'm going to start briefly introducing SAFE and what we are. We are an independent organization that strives to protect consumer and advance their rights within the EU food policy making process. We conduct three main activities, which are advocacy strategies on different issues, most of those that we are indeed mentioning here today. The raising public awareness and the training of consumers through educational program, and also leading several EU projects on food safety and agriculture. I hope that we're able to see a short video of who we are. I'll try to put play and hope it works.
Yes, it works. But without a sound, I think. Huh?
It's not working, the sound?
Yes, I don't hear anything.
Okay, well then I'll move on. Sometimes it happens with Zoom, but it was an explanation of several of the topics that we will be discussing today. So we at the moment we are being awarded for the second year consecutively the Life Operating Grant from the European Commission, focusing on three main pillars, which are issues related to food waste, food packaging, as for example food contact materials, and sustainable agriculture. We have an ongoing Erasmus Plus project on adolescent obesity and also on permaculture. And we have an additional EU project still funded by the Commission on tackling dual food quality, which is an issue that we believe should deserve definitely more attention, as sometimes you can have same products, but according to the place where they are exported or according to the country where consumed, they can have a different composition. So we have noticed, for example, that in several Eastern countries, the same product that you can buy in Italy, it can be then it can have a different composition and in another member state. So we are trying to put together consumer organization to address the issue. We are going to present today also our campaign on the definition of natural at EU level. And then we have also other projects and campaigns, for example, the removal of harmful additives, so for example, as E171. And also we are we are more board in the EU Food Policy Coalition with other NGOs. So in all the issues that we have mentioned today related to consumer information, educating consumer making the right choices, there are some very important issues that are connected to the unhealthy diets that consumers are conducting now. First of all, nearly 1 over 4 adolescents in Europe is obese or overweight. This is, of course, a problem that relates not only to the single individual, but it's really a problem of all society, as is the result of all way of aggressive marketing and body shaming and a sort of culture around food that has been created over the years. And this brings to a point that I think it's very important to address, which is the need of a new food environment, meaning that it's not only of course, education and understanding what products to buy and what an healthy diet is important, but it's very important as well to move towards a shift where all actors of the food supply chain can play a role to allow consumer making the healthy choices, starting from farmers to retailers to everyone that can change the food environment where consumers make their choices. Related to this, we indeed have. We are working on in this action to try to ensure that consumers can have healthier diets. Regarding the front of pack nutrition labeling system, we believe that the system that could be a better fit should highlight both negative and positive nutrient profile, and should inform on the total component of a product. This is why Nutri-Score for us is problematic, as it does not consider fully important information as the presence of additives and the presence of other substances, and it definitely disregard other important information, as for example full grain components, the freshness of ingredients, and of course we support a system that it's mandatory for all member states, and that it's driven by the sole mission of really improving consumer health over all other interests. For setting the nutrient profile, we are really happy with what the Commission has said, because we believe that it's really important and about time that we define this nutrient profile to try also to restrict the promotion of HFSS food, specifically on those products that are targeted for children. There is at the moment a problem on the type of natural claims that are applied on products that are then bought by children, and you can have a product that it's full of sugar and then be marketed as being full of fibers for your kids. So that it's an issue that should be changed, and it's part of that discussion on the food environment that we were meaning before. So of course also the graphic tool that should allow a different perception of the product, and also more concrete action on food reformulation. We are moving towards that trend, but there is definitely more to be done in that sense. And then at the end, we would like to talk about our campaign called We Value True Natural campaign. Mr. Hayes before said, like, are natural products really healthy, and how can I understand what is healthy for me, what it's not? Indeed, it's a very important topic, and we have conducted this report called Ensuring Proper Information to Consumer from Misleading Use of the Term Natural in Packaging. There is no definition of natural at the EU level. There is a reference of the term natural in some legislation. It's mentioned natural substance in a REACH regulation. Is it mentioned the term natural that can be added to other claims that are mentioned in the annex of the regulation on nutrition and health claims made on food? And then there is a definition of natural flavorings in the regulation on flavoring. But beside these three, none of these regulations set requirements for food packaging, nor indicated to be followed by food producers. So the suggested solution of calling for a case-by-case assessment at the member state level would go against what we have discussed today, which is indeed the possibility of allowing an harmonized framework, and to not have some products that are, targeted in a different way in member states, and that are perceived by consumers differently according to the place where they are. So consumers rely on food packaging really to grasp this information, and we believe it's absolutely important to prevent the use of like 100% natural ingredients, while there are not really no common criteria to define to claim such a thing. So based on our report, we have three main considerations. So the importance of defining a common definition, because the term natural really, it's able to evoke some characteristic that most of the time do not match with consumer expectations. The EU should define the criteria to use the term natural to ensure consumer protection, and to have precise standards, precise guidelines that food producers as well as public authorities can follow in order to allow products to be compared. Because if I go to the supermarket and I have two products that claim to be natural, one of them is without synthetic ingredients, there is no GMOs, and it's biodegradable. And the other one is full of synthetic ingredients, is processed and has additives inside. I am not allowed to, I cannot understand what's the real difference between the two products. I cannot make an informed choice. This is one of the examples, for example, that you can find in our report, that it's available in our website. To finish, we would like to have a final statement of what our goal to really move towards a more sustainable future. First of all, we would like to ensure that all legislative and non-legislative initiatives that will come up in the next 3 years left for this new commission are in line with the Farm to Fork strategy and the Green Deal objectives. We are seeing that a little bit to be struggles, and it's really important that everything that is mentioned in these initiatives, it's part and a core of all the new initiatives that will come forward. The shift towards a healthier food system should see responsibility equally distributed among all actors of the chain, as we mentioned before with the discussion of the new food environment. And then information and food packaging should be clear, understandable, and representative of the product's characteristic. So the same thing is applicable also for the new front of pack nutrition labeling system that will be developed. So this is our point, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dolce. I think you make this discussion a bit more wider, because I think it's important not to see only scores. So also what is natural. I think it's a basic discussion if you want to make a score or introduce something. And if you're not really define the basic discussions like what is natural, and also that it's also the package with misleading claims and pictures are perhaps more important than Nutri-scores can be. But what are you saying also to taking into account the Green Deal, the impact of the environment of products? But I have sometimes also the worries, and this we can discuss later, if we have too many science for climate, science for nutrition, natural, that I sometimes like this, all this information, if I'm opening the website, I'm clicking only through because I don't read it, that the consumer at the end is over-informed and don't want to read it, and it's only taking the package in the green, with the green science or whatever, that he's less carry about to inform himself if he's only looking on science. Perhaps this can be also a risk. Now we're coming to Emma Calvert, Senior Food Policy Officer of Boyk, also a consumer organization, well known, of course. Please, the floor is yours.
I'm just sharing my screen. Well, first of all, I'd just like to thank the organizers for inviting Boyk to come and speak today about food labeling and empowering consumers to make more informed choices. I should say that we work on food labeling in general, so important issues for us, which have already been mentioned, include origin labeling, as well as Federica just mentioned a very important issue about some terms which are sometimes misleadingly used on products, such as traditional or artisanal or natural. But today, because it's such a hot topic, I'm going to focus mostly on front of pack nutritional labeling. So just a brief introduction of who Boyk is, or what Boyk is. We are the European Consumer Organization, and we represent 45 independent consumer organizations from across 32 European countries, and we work a lot in the food team on nutrition issues such as marketing to children, nutritional claims as well, and of course, as I mentioned, front of pack nutritional labeling. So I think it's quite useful to maybe sort of see how we got to where we are today in terms of front of pack nutritional labeling. And as I'm sure you will all be aware, in 2011, the Food Information to Consumers Regulation was passed, and for us that brought some very welcome new obligations for food producers in terms of transparency towards consumers. And the one I'm thinking about, namely, is the Nutritional Declaration. The Nutritional Declaration, it gives per 100 grams the amounts in a food product of 7 key nutrients. So this is a very welcome new introduction, but for us, it still has some problems. It's usually found on the back of the pack. It's found in very, very small font. So even if you have good eyesight, it can be very difficult to see. I think you can probably see here that it's quite difficult to read, and that's magnified slightly. And also, it's not just easy to read, it's also, or not easy to read, it's also not easy to understand. So the average consumer doesn't have a very high level of nutritional knowledge. So it can be very difficult to understand if 8 grams of saturated fat is low or high, or if sugar, or 8 grams of sugar in a product could be low. So for us, it lacks an interpretive element. And it was a missed opportunity to introduce front of pack color-coded nutrition labeling to help consumers with their choices in the supermarket. What it did allow was for member states to endorse front of pack nutrition labels, and we've seen that has increased a lot in recent years. But of course, you can only voluntarily endorse these labels. You cannot make it mandatory in your territory. And I'll go into a little bit of detail in the next slide about why that's a problem. So what should a front of pack nutrition label look like for consumers from our perspective? I think it's really important that we recall that for a label to be seen as credible and trusted by consumers, and therefore then eventually used by consumers, it should be developed free from commercial interests, so government-led development. And we really want to make sure that public authorities are in the driving seat throughout the development process and the implementation to ensure that level of consumer trust, which is so important when implementing front-of-pack nutrition labels. Secondly, it should be easily understood at a glance. We know that consumers make purchasing decisions in the supermarket in a matter of seconds. It's a very time-pressured environment. So there should be an interpretive element to help them make that decision at a glance, and meaningful color codes have been demonstrated to be the most effective interpretive elements in helping consumers to make that choice. It should, of course, be based on robust, independent scientific evidence, which goes without saying, and it should be able to show that consumers have objectively understood the label. So not just that consumers say they have understood the label, but that they can understand the purpose for which the label was developed and are able to use it according to that purpose. And then with purchasing intention, it should also be able to show that consumers can choose healthier options, and it can improve the nutritional quality of their baskets. Last and not least, as I mentioned before, at the moment, any front of pack nutrition label which is endorsed in any member state has to be voluntary at the moment. And we're very pleased that the Commission have indicated that they will come forward with a mandatory proposal by the end of 2022, because we want to make sure that any consumer, no matter where they live in the European Union, are able to benefit from the effect of an effective front of pack nutrition label. So it should be in all countries, and it should also then be on all products, because if you allow a front of pack nutrition label to be voluntary, what you'll find is that the best performers are maybe more willing to put the label on their product, but it means that consumers are then deprived of seeing the full range of products, the labels on all products. So it really needs to be mandatory. And we and our members, we support Nutri-Score to be the harmonized future EU-wide mandatory label. And there are nearly 50 independent peer-reviewed scientific research articles which have demonstrated that it is the easiest label to understand. There's also good evidence in real life supermarket trials that it has made consumers' shopping baskets healthier. And that is particularly relevant for consumers from lower socioeconomic groups. And that's very important because these more vulnerable consumers tend to be the most at risk of being overweight or obese, as well as having a lower level of nutritional knowledge. So it's really important that it can demonstrate that lower income consumers can also be able to use it. It can also incentivize feed makers to improve their recipes as a side effect. It shouldn't be the primary purpose of a frontal pack nutrition label, which is a consumer information tool, but it can have a nice side effect that food makers try to improve their recipes. And finally, it has been shown that it is the most effective label in actually helping consumers to consume smaller portions. So compared to other labels, including a portion-based color-coded label, the Nutri-Score showed that it was the best and most effective label in helping consumers to eat smaller portions. I think I'll leave that there, but thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I think there's very important points. Of course, it must be a neutral instance who deciding what is healthy, a scientific based and neutral instance who are giving us the scientific input for such labeling. I think it's also clear what you say, that is something must be practical. This is always the questions. If I know from my father, he cannot see really, that if it's too small on the package, he cannot read it. And the question is then also then that the decision is made in the supermarket, you have no time, you taking your food very fast. That must be also that nobody's reading everything at once, it must be easy. But I think there must be also the danger, if I'm taking only food who have a B, and they're eating too much from this anyway, that they're thinking that I'm in a way, perhaps confidence that I'm eating healthy, but I don't eating healthy because in the composition at all is then, but I have in my wagon there with me. But I think this is interesting. This I think is leading them to the question and answer. I think to a discussion how we do it best. But I think the practical aspect, how the consumers are using this information, is very important. We're coming now to Alexander Anton, Secretary General of EDA. Please, the floor is yours. The daily glass of milk was once promoted in the past, in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Please, the floor is yours.
And it is still promoted for good reasons. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure, MEP Elasara. Thank you for being with us, Ms. van der Stappen. It's an honor to be with you on that stage. I didn't prepare any slides. I didn't prepare the advertisement for EDA. We are the European Dairy Association, representing 95% of the milk processed in the European Union. So we are representing the processors, the dairy companies, cooperatives and private companies, and which are basically mostly, of course, SMEs, smaller, medium-sized enterprises. But yes, we have in our membership the 10 out of the 20 global leaders in dairy, which is a good sign for Europe. Animal welfare labeling, origin labeling, environmental labeling, nutrition labeling. We heard from Federica about natural labeling. Labels seem to be the one solution, and the labelization of the European food policy is really impressive. Food labeling, empowering consumers to make informed choices, is the theme of that discussion today. And I'm really happy that nobody touched on the food safety or food quality aspects. I mean, Federica, you linked additives somehow to hazards, but that has been clarified, I think, in the chat in the meantime. So I do hope we all agree, for European milk and dairy products, for all European food, the EU origin of the product gives you a quality, gives you a guarantee when it comes to food safety and quality. This is a great achievement of the European Union, and one of its core elements, the single market. I'm a bit surprised to see in the meantime that the concept of unhealthy food seems to pop up again. We have over the last years, we've talked about unhealthy diets, unhealthy lifestyles, and 2 weeks ago on a presentation of DG Santé official, we've seen popping up a concept of unhealthy food, which worries me a bit. So the origin of the food has no impact on quality and safety. Nevertheless, the Citizens Initiative Eat Original, Unmask Your Food of 2018 claimed food safety as its first argument for their ask for a mandatory national origin labeling. And since MEP Christine Schneider and also Ms. van der Stappen touched on the origin labeling, I want to take 2 minutes to talk about it, if I may. We are fully in favor of origin labeling. In the dairy industry, we are proud of the animal origin of our products. We are proud of our 700,000 dairy farmers that produce the milk every day, of which 14,000 in Spain. So yes, we want this origin, animal origin, of which we are proud. We want that to be clear and to be protected. That's why today at the trilogue on the Common Agricultural Policy, there is the discussion on the protection of dairy terms. And I'm happy to see that all 3 MEPs involved in this conference have voted in favor of the protection of dairy terms. Now, when it comes to the geographical origin of labeling, it's a market reality. It's a marketing reality today beyond geographical indications. And 10% of all the GIs, of all the geographical indications protected in the European Union by the quality policy are dairy products, our iconic cheeses mainly. We as EDA, the European Dairy Association, we have established an extremely strict industry guideline on voluntary origin labeling. In contrast to founding and fundamental principles of our union, which is making national borders irrelevant for the movement of people and goods, national mandatory origin is a basic contradiction to these founding principles. And we agree with many MEPs, inter alia MEP Herbert Dorfmann, that voluntary, mainly regional origin labeling with a strict and harmonized framework corresponds to the consumer expectations and is aligned with the single market principles. Now, origin labeling is not the core topic today, so I will limit me to 2 remarks. The then French Minister of Agriculture, who started the national mandatory origin labeling laws back in 2016, made it very clear that his French labeling decree was designed as a protectionist measure. And let me quote, last quote, Advocate General Gerald Hogan from the European Court of Justice, who stated in his legal opinion of 16th July 2020 that mandatory national origin labeling will ultimately pave the way to appeal to purely nationalistic, even chauvinistic instincts on the part of consumers. The European Court of Justice, of course, annulled the French decree. State-supported gastro-chauvinism simply has no place in our union. Now, origin labeling was also linked by Ms. van der Stappen to sustainability. While origin labeling discussions take place at least in a defined geographical space with the green claims or sustainability labels, we will enter into a not yet defined territory of sustainable labeling framework. We as a European Dairy Association have, together with DGNB, elaborated over the past years the dairy product environmental footprint, dairy path, that allows to assess a yogurt, butter, milk, dairy products against 17 environmental indicators. The scheme has been approved by DGNB, the European Commission, all 27 member states, and an independent body. Any simplistic approach, like focusing only on greenhouse gas emissions, does simply not correspond to the complexity of the issue at stake. Maybe another topic for the discussion later on or the next webinar. Now, the level of complexity does not decrease when talking nutrition and diets, and to the according labeling approach. Maybe Steffi, you want me to present, or do you get up my slides?
I can do it for you.
Just to show you the complexity and the need of harmonization and the need for science-based and common sense in that discussion. This is a tweet from 2017 on the traffic light, on the UK traffic light that was introduced in 2007, which is predominant on the British market since 2012, so 10 years ago. And yes, there is something seriously wrong with a system where Diet Coke ranks healthier than a semi-skimmed milk. And I do apologize for Diet Coke. I should have said a diet soda. That is on the market since 2012, broadly in the United Kingdom. And we've seen the official Public Health Authority England publishing a report in February 2021, so a few weeks ago, clearly stating that over the last 10 years of the implementation of the UK traffic light, which is basically an even more simplified Nutri-Score, there is no impact on child obesity. I'm more than happy to send you that official report from the health authorities. Next slide, please. Complexity also when it comes to Nutri-Score, and I'm grateful for Dr. Stefan Peters from Den Haag, from the Netherlands, who treated that one. You have exactly the same milk, semi-skimmed milk, 1.8% of fat content. In Nutri-Score, one is B, one is A. So there is a huge complexity, a huge need for harmonization. Next slide, please. And here you see a quote from MEP Renate Sommer in 2017 too. Don't you see the danger of letting big multinationals set parts of the food law? They might use this loophole for their own purposes. That was a quote of MEP Renate Sommer on the initiative of 6 multinational companies. You see the logos on the screen. They don't call them multinationals any longer. They call themselves now multi-locals, which is brilliant. And this joins a bit what Emma said from Boyk, right? The authorities should be in the driver's seat. It must be the authorities to be in the driver's seat. And I join MEP Christine Schneider, who talked about an app that must be a European authority approved app. Otherwise, it's Yucca or any other one that would be driven by market players. Now, one of these companies that you see on the brands that you see on that slide, next slide, please, is very outspoken for front of pack nutrition labeling. But when it comes to their core product, they put a red heart and not a red stop sign, because cheese is simply so good, so healthy, people love it. Cheese does not deserve a red stop sign, but a red heart. So even those companies who are in line with that, don't use it when it fits their purposes. Next slide, please. Now, after that, a bit provocative, let's come back to balanced and healthy diets. Frankly, and here again, Emma, Federica, that could be a slide from your organizations. The growing problem of obesity, overweight, and malnutrition across the European society and their long-term costs and consequences for the health systems deserve the highest attention of the EU policymakers. And I'm happy to see that all of the speakers expressed their utmost confidence into the Commission. I've heard Mr. MEP Lazaras claiming that we want the Commission to propose. We have that confidence in the guardian of the treaty. We therefore, as European dairy industry, welcome that the EU Commission brings back to the spotlight the discussions on the importance of balanced and healthy diets and clear consumer information. Oops, now you're a bit quick, Steffi. Thank you. We believe that such a complex issue like diet, nutrition deserves a complete and scientifically well-grounded solution. Now, the next slide is on the policy option proposed by the services of Ms. van der Stappen. I will not go into that slides. That has been proposed. Next slide, please. And here you see the policy discussion as we see it translated into the different schemes that we are used to. We know, and they have been mentioned. Many of them have been mentioned. Next slide, please, Steffi. And here again, I mean, I don't know how you want to deal with that in your unit, Ariane. It is a real ambition. You have a real ambitious goal, and you touched on the nutrient profile disaster 2009, and that was not on your desk, not before of the Commission, but Europe simply did not deliver on the nutrient profiles last time. So the challenge your political masters have put on you right now is incredible, and I can feel with you. That's the deadlines for the European Commission. I hope it's correct. So we will have in March 2022, so in 1 year's time, an EFSA opinion on the front of pack nutrition labeling and nutrient profiles. And the European Commission will present a legal proposal for harmonized mandatory front of pack nutrition labeling by end of 2022. And then MEP Lazara, you will have to see in the European Parliament. And now, our position on front of pack nutrition labeling, and here again, I guess it could be copied by Emma or Federica Johann, for your organizations. Any European front of pack nutrition labeling should conform with key principles. It should be in line with dietary recommendation. That's what MEP Demau, MEP Lazara told us. Steffi, you were too quick. It should improve the information to consumers about the overall nutritional quality of food. And in that case, of course, you recognize the nutritional contribution and health benefits of dairy. It should always be based on sound scientific evidence. And we think it should be voluntary but harmonized. And on the left-hand side of that slide, you see a snapshot on what is dietary recommendations, official dietary recommendations across the European Union. You have 2 to 3 servings of dairy for adults and 3 to 4 servings for children. You see what is about defined as a serving. Now, and now I'm linking back. No, go back, Steffi. Now I'm linking to you, Ms. van der Stappen, because you linked, or the Commission links the healthy and sustainable choice, the easy choice. I'm going now to the 2019 Eat Lancet report. Some of you may recall the Eat Lancet report of 2019. The Norwegian billionaire Gunhild Stordalen, who financed that. And there, if you read it for milk and dairy, they claim 250 milliliters to 500 milliliters, so half a liter of milk to a quarter to half a liter of milk is the daily consumption that is within the boundaries, the planetary boundaries. And frankly, the dairy industry worldwide is not able to deliver that amount of milk to each and every citizen living on that planet. Next slide, please. Now we have done, of course, an analysis of possible consequences for dairy on the front of pack nutrition labeling, and we focus here on Nutri-Score, because that is a bit the one that seems to be have a certain advantage right now. Depending on the scheme and the nutrient profiles behind it, we risk that dairy, especially cheese, but of course also butter and cream, possibly full-fat milk and full-fat yogurt, will get a negative label score color, as it is already the case for Nutri-Score, where 85% of all cheeses are rating D, like delicious. And so you don't even give the consumer the choice. If you are in front of the cheese shelf of a European supermarket, 85% of all cheeses are rated D. Why that? Because cheese is, getting back to you, Federica, is quite natural. And MEP Lazara told us already, for cheese, you need milk, you need salt, you need rennet. That's it. And we can't reformulate the cheese. We can't reformulate because not only the iconic cheeses that are protected under the GI, the geographical indication system, but any cheese, we simply can't reformulate it. You can't replace the milk, you can't replace the salt in a cheese. So if nutrient profiles were to be established, we risk that, especially for cheese, which has no whatsoever a possibility for reformulation on its salt, fat, or saturated fat content, we can't make any claims on its calcium or protein content. If nutrient profiles are linked to the front of pack nutrition labeling, only products with green or yellow scores could possibly make a health or nutrition claim. All this will, of course, lead to an unfair treatment of milk and dairy, will contribute to give a negative health image. And we've heard our MEP Demau, I think it was MEP Demau who said, who didn't have a bad conscience when choosing a red product, right? It is a red color is a red sign. And consumers will turn away from dairy, that's a big risk. And then we see unmet dairy, official dairy consumption recommendations with all the deficiencies that are that come with that one. And just to let you know, in 11 out of the 27 member states of our union today, the average consumer does not meet the official dietary recommendations for milk and dairy, including big countries like Spain, MEP Lazara, so please join me to drink some milk, and Poland. Voila, last slide, please. So again, on that note, I put up again the slide that we basically, I think, can all share, can all sign off. A last comment maybe to the Nutri-Score that has been highlighted by Emma. I mean, there is a study, I mean, we don't let us play with the studies, but there is a study, a very serious one from Dr. Stefan Peters of last, I think 2 weeks ago, and he made a peer review of all the studies on the impact of the Nutri-Score in the supermarkets. Despite all the efforts in the supermarkets, I'm living in Belgium, Germany, and France, wherever you go to a supermarket, the Nutri-Score is big time explained. Despite all the efforts, you get even a discount if you buy an A or B product. Despite all that efforts in marketing and in building up consumer awareness, there hasn't been any sign of change of consumer behavior through the Nutri-Score. As little as has been, there is no evidence, no sign of any consumer behavior change in the UK with the traffic light, at least not where we want to have the change at the obesity rate, at the health rate. So with that, handing over back to you, Dr. Heitz.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I think you give us also a very practical presentation. I think this is always the question, what is the impact of such measures? And if it has no impact, why we are against this if the consumer is not changing his behavior? It's always like the chicken and the egg. So I think also your examples, I think the core message is also if it's where it's this food labeling, is it judgmental or informing? It's giving a judgment about the kind of food, if it's bad, or it's informing, empowering the consumer. It's complicated. We have a lot of questions. I will go fast through it. We have not so much time, but I want to give the chance also to our participants to ask questions. The one is was already there, but I would ask this. We have in Europe different dietary recommendations, and they are not harmonized. Is this really necessary for such a food labeling approach? We should do this first, or is this not such a problem? Perhaps to Mr. van der Stappen, please.
Oh, sorry, I didn't want to spring them first, but there it's a very valid comment. And indeed, today it's not harmonized because it's a member state competence, but EFSA is exactly looking at it right now to make a dietary recommendation for the EU population. So it's coming that will come up with the scientific opinion of EFSA. So because, as rightly mentioned by several, I would say, speakers, but also by the attendances, it's not good to build on something that it's not harmonized at EU level. So we took I would say the action there.
I have only one answer to one question because otherwise we will come not through. But you can write also to the participants. There's also a question, is the communication with the consumer on minor improvements, reformulations. Perhaps is the approach, I think, can an option be to limit communication on minor improvements to social media and advertising and not on pack? So it is a question if it's perhaps the wrong approach to start with the packaging, or we can do not both. Dolce, Federica Dolce, you wanted to answer this question.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a very interesting question. And of course, it's all complementary action that can be followed by other things. Of course, front of pack nutrition labeling is not enough alone. There should be a way to try to, for example, avoid heavy marketing of sugary products in the times where kids are watching the TV over the day. It could be postponed for after dinner. Like there should be a way also to protect the audience for receiving certain type of information, specifically as a young audience that is not capable of grasping the right type of information, because you just see your favorite type of cereals and then you want to buy them. So that doesn't mean that, of course, there cannot be a complementary action on the front of pack nutrition labeling and on the reformulation of product and all the rest. But definitely, marketing and communication of food, it's important. It cannot be the sole action, but it's important.
Thank you very much. We're coming to the next question from I'm hearing a lot of reference to the easy way of FOB neutral infos should be given to consumers, in particular mentioning that the average consumer have not enough time to spend when they go to supermarkets and buy their foods. Food can not only be bought in supermarkets, but in small shops, restaurants, bars, etc. The role of retailers and food service providers should not be ignored. Imposing new mandatory rules on FOB can be useless and become a burdensome problem, especially for small operators. How to address this issue? Perhaps Ms. Calvert, perhaps here was your topic, how to make fast decision and the right decision.
Yes, thank you very much for the question. I would just like to clarify that the Nutri-Score would not be used, for example, it's not intended to be used, at least for now, in restaurants or bars, and small bakeries or artisanal producers that produce small handcrafted foods. They're not going to be expected to be using the Nutri-Score. It would be for larger companies to use it. But on the question of SMEs, as we know, it's still voluntary, but maybe the country which has the deepest integration of Nutri-Score in its market is France. And if you look at the list of over 500 companies who have willingly begun to use the Nutri-Score, over 95% of these companies are SMEs. So clearly there's a great will from SMEs actually to inform their consumers about the healthiness of the products that they produce. And I would also say that if we take the Nutri-Score, for example, if you have to provide the Nutritional Declaration already, the information is already there. It's a simple one-off calculation, which does not actually require constant re-evaluation. So it would be a one-off calculation, which is relatively simple to implement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next question is to Mr. Lassara. You have stated that if we don't reach an agreement on mandatory front of package, it doesn't matter. I understood it from you. If we don't reach a consensus, we don't need to push it. Please.
Hi, thank you. No, what I have said is that if we don't have yet, or we haven't come up with a balanced labeling system, we cannot rush to try to push one that we have a lot of stakeholders or maybe parts of the parliament in this case that doesn't like it. So we need to work much more on trying to come up with a proper balance and balanced labeling system that can actually somehow bring together all the stakeholders. I know that that's almost impossible in many cases. The Commission knows as well, but we have to try, because if we leave out a big bunch of some stakeholders like farmers or small producers, then we have an issue. So that's what I'm saying, that we need first to come up with a better labeling system, not perfect because it's impossible, but we have to work harder on this. And I don't want to buy or fall into the argument of the least bad system. I think we can do much better than that. And that's what I meant when I said that we don't have to rush.
Thank you very much. The next question is, I'm summarizing this because of the time. It's about if you're usually calculating this amounts and recommendations. It is calculated for a man for 80 kilos. It's not for a child, not for a woman. How we can say it? This is the question. How, when we consuming calories, do we not know differences? Is not misleading if we don't take into account that people are different? Perhaps who wants to answer this? Johann Sanders. If you're making your products and you have to put it, how is the bread? How much bread a normal person should eat, and what is a normal person?
No, that's to the point which we made. It's all about education as well. So if you make very simple systems, people don't learn. But I think we need to educate people what's a healthy diet, and I think what Ariana has been saying, to come up with a clear recommendation about a healthy diet is, I think, is a very important step, so that people can judge what they want to eat in that healthy diet.
Then we have the questions. Always one on it, otherwise coming to the last two questions because we're running out of time. Perhaps for Anton, is there a proposal to narrow the origin? In many occasions, you find, for instance, honey produced by bees from the EU, no EU, which is the same as stating bees from this world. Thank you. How serious is this? Please.
No, I'm not representing the
milk is the same. We can say it's the milk is the product is
milk and honey. Milk and honey have something in common beyond the Bible. That is true. And you're talking to a convinced Catholic. the origin labeling of milk and dairy products. So we have already 320 cheeses, queso de manchego, parmigiano reggiano, gorgonzola, which are protected in a specification where the area of production is limited. That is one thing. That is a fantastic system to underline the excellence of European dairy beyond the GI system. Now then, if you go to a supermarket shelf in Belgium, France, Germany, wherever you go, you find products labeled with the origin, which has the greatest impact in terms of consumer willing to spend money if it's regional, right? If you are with MEP Herbert Dorfmann in Alto Adige in South Tyrolia, people where they have to label the origin of the milk nowadays, Italia, because but people are willing to pay the extra money for the product that's coming from Alto Adige, from South Tyrolia. It's a regional thing. And together, and I believe a regional thing should even be in a European harmonized approach, cross-national, because there is not only South Tyrolia, there's Tyrolia, which is in Austria, which is one region. And so the problem here is that we are talking about mandatory national origin labeling. We are building up national borders. We are building up national borders. And this is linked, and Ariane, you said it, to sustainability. Now, if you are living in Lille in France, and you're drinking for sustainability reasons, don't mainly transport French milk that comes from Brittany, that might be a bigger transport than if it comes from Belgium, right? So national origin labeling can make sense for Malta, Cyprus, Luxembourg, but for bigger countries, it simply doesn't make sense. And it is in contrary to the founding principles of our union. And again, I quote the Advocate General at the European Court of Justice, who say, this will ultimately pave the way to nationalistic, even chauvinistic instincts on the side of the consumers. And that's something we can't afford. We don't want to, from a political point of view and from an industry point of view. It doesn't make sense because we've been used to collecting milk. If you have a dairy close to a border, national border, over the last 40 years, you started to collect milk in all the area around, and you didn't care about national borders. And nowadays you're collecting the conventional milk and the organic milk, and in the next step you would have to collect the milk again according to the national borders to label it right. That simply doesn't make sense.
Thank you very much. And we're coming now to the end. We have to come to the end. I think there are so many questions left. One is now urgent, was also coming out to me, double label. And this should be questions, perhaps, I don't find the questions, but anymore. Okay, I have to send this question to Mr. van der Steppen because I don't find it anymore here. But I think we are also in the end. One last thing I wanted to mention, highlight. I think I am a friend of data. What are the experience? I think this was mentioned in countries we have already such food labeling. What is the positive impact? Is there impact we can measure? And the point is in which time framework we had this. And I think this would be one thing. And the second thing, we have a lot of data. I think the social impact is very interesting. I think we have this from other experience in Germany, from Lidl, where they changed the information on how animals are fed or treated, and they changed also the price. And the impact of the consumer behavior was not so impressive. So if we would have more data, I think we would have also more knowledge how to inform the consumers in the best way, because often perhaps we are thinking it's very informative, but it's not. So I'm coming to the end. I would say, I think this is only the beginning of a discussion, because there are so many questions left. I have to say very much thank you to Mr. Lazzara. I think thank you that you were here, and perhaps you want to enter the debate in SME Connect, because I think this will follow us for the next years, and I hope that we make the right decisions for the consumers, for our SMEs. And thank you we had here really a fruitful debate between producers, between representatives of consumers, and also between the politics and also with the Commission. Thank you very much, and see you next time.